Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for tuning in. My name is Haley Tiart, and today I have the privilege of speaking with Mr. Ben Smith, Shadow Minister of Education and Youth, Sports, and Community, and the Opposition Senate Leader and Opposition Spokesperson in the Senate for National Security. Mr. Smith is also evening, everyone. OBA candidate. Thank you so much for tuning in. My name is Haley Tiart, and today I have the privilege of speaking with, pardon me. Mr. Smith is also the OVA candidate for the by-election in Constituency 8, Smith South. But before we dive into our conversation, a vital reminder, the by-election for Constituency 8 is just around the corner, scheduled for Thursday, October 5th. Advanced polling for incapacitated and travelers will be held on Thursday, September 28th at St. Patrick's Church. Participating in this democratic process is extremely important. Your voice matters, and it's crucial to make it heard. This is your chance to shape the future of your community, and every vote counts. We urge all residents of Constituency 8 to check in with the Bermuda Parliamentary Registry to ensure that you're registered to vote, and you can do this by going to elections.gov.bm. Without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and welcome Mr. Smith. How are you doing today?
I'm good. Thank you so much for having me.
Of course. Thank you for joining us. So just want to go ahead and kick this interview off by asking you to just tell me a bit about yourself. Who is Ben Smith?
Yeah, so I am a Bermudian who grew up in Southampton. I am the son of Hubert Smith Sr., the entertainer. Bermuda's Another World. My mother she was a dressmaker. She's still alive, but my father has passed on. I have two sisters. One's a school teacher and one works for an international business. I have been the national coach and a coach of a club for the last 20-something years, representing Bermuda at 2 Olympic Games and working with young people for, I would say it's since I was 16 years old when I was working out at White's Island as an instructor. In my family, working with young people has been a passion. I have several family members that are teachers, and I think it's important that you give back to your community, and what you would like to see in the future, you help to guide that.
Definitely. What do you think in your experiences, what have you learned from, working with young people? What has been something that has really impacted you based on those experiences?
So what I would say is that there's been a change in young people. It's one of the reasons that I actually got involved with politics. Bermuda's always been a place that the majority of people that left and went away to school always had in their mind that they would return home. They'd come back to Bermuda and be part of the community in Bermuda. And I started to see that more of them were making a decision that maybe that wasn't going to be the choice.
Mm-hmm.
To me, that's been the major shift. And I figured it was time. I needed to get involved, one, to find out why were they making that decision. And what I started to hear constantly from them was that it was kind of lack of opportunity. There were interesting opportunities all around the world, but Bermuda didn't seem to be the opportunity that they were choosing.
Mm-hmm.
To me, that has been the focal point. We have to figure out what is going to give those opportunities to our young people and to create that excitement to come home again.
Mm-hmm. I agree. I think opportunities is definitely one part of it, but I think there's a lot of things in Bermuda that, persuade young people to look at other opportunities. Yes, opportunities overseas is a big one. I'm overseas in part because of opportunities that have been made available to me. But I think a lot of it is also with the economy. It costs a lot of money to live in Bermuda. It's not a lot of housing available for young people to come back and live the same lifestyles that they live overseas. And then there's also just some cultural shifts that I think need to happen for especially some marginalized groups that don't necessarily feel accepted in Bermuda's community. So I think opportunities is definitely a big part of that. But I think that there are so many different things and so many different reasons why young people leave, and addressing that would be a great thing to do to improve Bermuda. So absolutely agree with that. So I know in the beginning of this interview, when I introduced you, I listed a number of your various titles. You're Shadow Minister of Education, as well as Shadow Minister of Youth, Sports, and Community. And then you also have roles in the Senate. You're a Senate leader for opposition, as well as the opposition spokesperson in Senate for National Security. Can you tell me in this past year what you've accomplished in these roles and what you're most proud of?
Yeah, so as the Senate leader, I was able to lead my team, which was myself, Doug DeCudo, and Robin Tucker. Um, Being part of the Senate, it was a different experience for me. I had previously been in the House of Assembly. It is it's an honor to be in that situation, but it's also quite a heavy task when you realize that the information that has gone through the process of the House of Assembly it is this opportunity to make an amendment if there's something that needs to be changed, and you support whatever the legislation that comes in that is going to work in the best interests of the community. But in times when maybe you disagree with it, you have to push back in that area. The part that it's interesting because when you list all of those different titles that I have, so the first one I will say is that I have resigned as a member of the Senate. That is one of the things that has to happen in order for me to stand for this upcoming election. So we'll have a new Senate team going forward.
Okay.
But the reason that we have to have multiple titles the way we do right now is because there are only 6 MPs in the House of Assembly. And when you're in the Senate, you also have to share multiple duties. What that does is it allows you to kind of get deep into the details on all of those different ministries and kind of drill down and find out what is happening from a cost perspective, what is actually happening on the ground within within each of those ministries. To me, that is the part that I have found interesting and rewarding. But I also think that it has shown me that there are things that we can do better. One of the things that I actually tried to get accomplished in the Senate that I wasn't able to do, but I do believe it's the direction that we need to go, is change the way we handle our budget debate, as an example. You have a budget debate that happens in the House of Assembly, and a week later, you're going to have that same budget debate happen in the Senate. The exact same briefs that were read out in the House of Assembly are going to be read out in the Senate. Well, if you want people to be interested and be engaged with kind of that budget debate and what it is, which is laying out what will be the agenda for the year, but also how we're going to pay for each of those things, I think that we have to come up with a new way of doing that so that it is more engaging, so that it actually means something to not just the people that are debating it, but also to the population, so they understand what it is that we're doing and how we're doing it. That's something that I'll continue to work towards.
Cool. And for our listeners, what does that look like tactically?
Which part?
Yeah, so you said that the budget gets read in the House of
House of Assembly. So I'll just as an example. So what happens every February? You're going to get a budget book, and the budget book will break down for each ministry and each department within each ministry. This is the total that will be spent, and then there will be a line item for every item. For every part of the ministry, it's going to have a number, and it's going to tell you this is what is going to be spent on vehicles, for instance. This is what's going to be spent on electricity. And as we go through that, it's a process of checks and balances. Okay, so are we spending the money on things that are actually going to help us, that are important, or are we putting money in places that maybe we could take a little bit off of here and add it to somewhere else? That's the point of that debate. It's really the focus of the taxpayers' money. But really, a lot of times it comes down to reading for a long period of time. So there isn't a debate. Well, that's not helping anybody. And the truth is that's been done throughout history, depending on who. It doesn't matter who's in government. It's really what that process looks like. But just because a process has happened that way for a really long time doesn't mean that it's not something we can't look at and fix and bring up to date and move in a different direction so that we can do things better for the country.
Got you. So it sounds like more so like a procedural change.
Yes.
Got you. Understood. So based off of you hold all of these positions, just resigned from the Senate to join this election. Why do you now want to be representative for Smith South? Because like you've been in government, had the opportunity to make change, influence change. Why C-8?
So the truth is C-8 just became available, right? It comes down to the leader of our party resigned from being the leader, but also resigned from his seat.
Mm-hmm.
There are only 6 seats that are available for our party at the election time. That's what happened. But normally, you're not going to have an opportunity to go to a seat and be able to get into the House of Assembly unless somebody retires, resigns, and that's what's happened.
Mm-hmm.
With the experience that I've had by both being in the House of Assembly and in the Senate and learning kind of what the process is, what we need to do, and being part of the rebuilding of our party over the 6-year period, I thought it was important for not only for me to take on that role, because when you only have 6 people, you have to make sure that each of those people is working towards the goal.
Mm-hmm.
It's much harder for the voice of the opposition to be heard when you only have 6 voices.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it opens up an opportunity in the Senate for us to put somebody there so that we can continue to kind of grow those voices. To me, it has been a great opportunity to introduce myself to the people in constituency 8.
Mm-hmm.
The truth of the matter is Bermuda is a really small community.
Yeah.
When in most places we're a town. So yes, we are divided up into different jurisdictions for an election, but the truth is we're Bermudians. The issues that we're having are going to be from one end of the island to the other. Yes, the local issue might be a little bit different with kind of street issues, but the overall issues of the country are always very similar. And I think it's important that the constituents get the best representation that they can, and that's what I'm striving to do.
Absolutely. And that really just leads me into my next question. So like, how do you plan to, if elected, serve constituency 8?
So the first thing that I've done in this process of kind of introducing myself to people, which is something that I've learned in this process over the last 6 years, is to learn what they are looking for.
Mm-hmm.
I think a lot of times what happens is politicians and really governments and parties tend to focus on what their thoughts are, what their process is. But if you don't actually ask the community and find out what the important parts are for the community,
Mm-hmm.
then really are you serving the community or are you serving kind of your interests?
Mm-hmm.
To me, that listening part is really important. I think it's in the situation that the country is in presently. There are a lot of things that can be taken in kind of in a negative light, right? We have an aging population, we have a low birth rate, we have issue where our young people are making decision to be overseas. And not all of that is negative. I believe that there are opportunities that young people should be taking outside of the country. Some of that experience that they're gaining, maybe they're going to come back at some point and enrich our community further because of that experience. But each of these challenges, because that's what it is, it's a challenge. As our population shrinks, the problem that you have is that the cost of the country gets put as a burden on the smaller population size. That has to be the focus, and we have to do everything that we can to make sure that that's the message that's repeated over and over again. Our focus has to be, how do we move this country into the future and make it a place that we can survive in and then thrive in.
Mm-hmm. I completely agree with you. I have 2 follow-up questions. The first one you mentioned about really listening to the community. I feel like we hear that a lot from politicians, but it's really just comes down to those tactical things that you plan to do. Like, how do you plan to do that?
Yeah, so the first step, like I said, is obviously I'm introducing myself to a new community.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, the the three things that I've heard on almost every doorstep, they're going to be in a different order each time potentially, but it's been education, healthcare, and the economy. All those things are connected. But if you see that that's the priority, if
Mm-hmm.
you see that every group that you talk to is that's the focus, that's their priority, then every plan that you come up with has to be how you're going to work towards solving the problems that are important to that population. So for me, it's you learn by listening, and then you put together a plan that is going to match what that community is looking for.
Mm-hmm.
The thing that I've heard from the young people in the constituency that I've been able to meet so far is that for them, it is the people that have come back from school to Bermuda and they're looking for a job. So some are in the process of looking for a job, not finding that opportunity because they're being told that they don't have enough experience.
Mm-hmm.
You have others that are trying to figure out how are you going to be able to get to the point where you can move out of the house and have some independence. And you have others that are saying, well, I'm a creative. I believe in doing things a certain way, and it doesn't seem like that is here in Bermuda, or it's not available to me.
Mm-hmm.
So what we have to do is start to put that information together and say, well, how can we come up with a plan that at least starts to solve those issues? Because it's not like you can flip a light switch and fix it immediately, but some of those things have to be implemented quickly so that we can have our young people believe that this is an opportunity for them. So for me, it's if you are coming back and you're hearing over and over again that you don't have the experience, how can we put together something that's going to get them that experience so that they're not hearing that? Is that a program that we're going to reach out to the companies that they're trying to come back and work for and say, how do we get them this experience? Is this something that you can help us with? So potentially they're going to do an internship and it's not in Bermuda, it's in another country, and they're, see what I mean? So it's just, you listen and then come up with a plan that's going to line up with it.
Yeah, I think, that's really important. Listening to that feedback, taking it back, trying to come up to with something that directly addresses those issues and implementing it, and hoping that it goes well.
And hoping that it goes well, correct.
Yes. I wanted to ask, just because when I first asked this question, a part of your answer also just touched on the economy and the small population size, cost of living. Just wanted to give you an opportunity to share, if you wanted to, like if you had any like core philosophy that like your perspective on the economy, how we should fix it, or something, just so that your voters will be able to understand exactly what your views on those issues.
So obviously the economy is a big subject, but I'll give you two kind of points here. The simple one is that we have to grow the pie. If we don't grow the pie, and what's happened is over an extended period of time, what we've been doing is dividing the pie up. And what I mean by that is if you don't have money that's coming from outside of the country into the country, then all we're doing is sharing the money that's circulating within the country. Mm-hmm. So if you open up a new business, you're not opening up a new, with your new idea, you've come up with a business, but it's the same small population size. So what tends to happen is you're just taking a piece of business from somebody else that already exists. What you have to do is have more people in the country to increase the opportunity. That's the part that is difficult, right? So from an immigration standpoint, we've heard numbers like we need 8,000 people, we need 10,000 people. That's one side of it. To me, what you also have to do is make sure that we are following the data. Mm-hmm. We need to collect data and then use the data to make our decisions. So if we have an example in an immigration policy that says we have 10 Bermudians that are out of work and they're plumbers, we should know that we have those 10 Bermudians that are out of work that are plumbers. If we know that number and 10 work permits are put up, that's a pretty simple deal. But if we don't actually have that first set of information, Now we have a logjam. We're not talking the correct language to make the decision. So the difference would be is if you actually only have 3 Bermudians that are applying for that job and you can get the 3 Bermudians employed, now it's simple to make the 7 work permits available. It shouldn't be a long process because you don't actually have a Bermudian applying for the job, looking for the job. I think sometimes, like what I said to you earlier about listening and then making your plan match what you're learning, that's the part that I think sometimes we miss. A lot of us are saying hospitality is missing. And because hospitality is missing, we want to grow that field. But are we asking the young people that are coming back from school or graduating from high school if hospitality is what they actually want to be involved in? And if we're not putting them in a direction that makes them feel like they want to be part of hospitality, we're growing that field, but we're not actually going to be creating jobs that they're going to want to be a part of. So, but that's also when you're talking to young people, you have to say, well, these are the jobs that are going to be available. This is what we're creating. So when you go away to school and you're going to study something, understand that if you take something that's not going to match the jobs that are going to be available, you're going to have a difficulty. Those are some of the honest conversations that I think have to happen, but you do that by having the data, having the information so that when we have that conversation, it's based off of real, live, this is what is happening in the country, so we can make a decision that makes sense.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. I'm a big data person, love it. And the data tells the story, and that is how you should best make decisions. Data-driven decision making. That's where it's at.
To me, that should be our mantra. We're a small community. We should have the data on everything that we're doing. And when you make those decisions, you know why you're making them.
Absolutely. Absolutely agree with that. We're going to transition a little bit to your party, just a little bit. And I want to ask about your views on the public's perception of the OBA. What do you think that the public's perception of the OBA is? And as you are going through this election period for the by-election, how do you plan to navigate these perceptions or reshape them afterwards? Not one within the constituency community, but also within Bermuda.
So when I got involved with politics in 2017, the One Bermuda Alliance had been the government. They lost the election, and I was elected. So I came into a room that had been completely shifted. But the perception was that the One Bermuda Alliance hadn't done specific things to help people. That was the message that we were hearing. The problem was
sorry, you cut out for a second.
Oh, sorry. Can you hear me now? Yeah. So the issue is that in Bermuda, it's a small community. What I will tell you that I learned pretty quickly, and in 2017, prior to, I would say a month before that election, I was like most Bermudians. I'm sitting on the outside with my perception of what the party is and what the party's doing. I think what happens is if the party is not doing a good job communicating what they are doing, then whatever someone else says about them becomes the reality. So the issue is you had an alliance. It was 2 parties that were formed together in order to govern. They won the election. They go in and the economy was in a bad state. The truth is there were bills to be paid, which meant that they had to focus on turning the ship around as quickly as possible. What I think happened was they didn't do a great job of bringing the country along for the ride, like explaining this is what we're doing, this is why we're doing it. If you do that, if you communicate with your constituents, if you communicate with your population that this is the plan, this is why we're doing it, I think we would have been in a completely different situation. Because in a 4.5-year period, they built multiple hotels, they put forward an airport, they bring America's Cup to Bermuda and you have like 100 million people viewing the country, which had never been done before. And it was this amazing opportunity for us to kickstart what we should be doing next.
Mhm.
But if you had seen the perception in 2017, everything I just said didn't happen. Well, that's the problem. If you're not explaining and telling people this is what we're doing, why we're doing it, and this is the plan and how we're going to get there. And it's not as simple as saying it in a way that some people are going to hear and take in. You have to
Mhm.
explain it so that everybody understands what it is that you're doing. And I think that that wasn't the case. And because of it, it paid the price. So following on from that, I thought it was important for me to help to rebuild the party. What we did was we have spent time communicating, listening, right? We've talked to stakeholders. What is it that's important? And now spent the time to actually bring in different people from different walks of life to be part of the party. Um, when you make decisions, if you have a cross section of the community, you're hearing all of those different voices. So when you make your decision, it's going to take in consideration of all the different parts of our community. See, what happens is when you are only in kind of an echo chamber, you only hear the things that are happening in your box. That can't be the case. I think that we've done a really good job to put ourselves in a position to be better at that. But it's a process, right? Um, Listening is more important than speaking, but of course in politics it's your voice that gets heard, right? So a lot of times people are saying things just because they think that's what people want to hear. Instead, what we have to do is listen so that what you're saying is what they want to hear. That's the change, and that's the change that we will be continuing to put forward.
That sounds great. I think just one other thing I think that at least I've heard about people's perceptions of the OBA, and I think it's sort of connected to the communication problem, is also just like communicating and addressing the legacy that you just briefly mentioned. I think that is something that I've heard from a lot of people on social media, young and old. It's a lot of people feel like there hasn't been um a very blatant and blunt addressing of the party's history. And I think that is, if we're talking about like communication problems, I think that's one of the biggest ones. But it's definitely great to hear that you are intent on listening to what people are saying and addressing those problems.
I actually agree with you 100%. I had a long conversation with one of your colleagues recently, and that was the exact message that she gave me.
Mm.
Um, the difficult thing is that when you change the party, right? So a lot of the voices that should be telling that story are not in the room, right? So what you have to do is say, okay, am I going to tell their story? I'm going to ask them for them to tell the story, because really that's the shift, right? The problem is that Bermuda's an interesting place. There's a narrative that, the party that was part of the alliance was the United Bermuda Party. Most young people were not alive to know what the United Bermuda Party is. So the narrative is only told from what people around them say.
Mhm.
But for all the good of one party, there's always bad, right? There's the balance that happens. The economy that um, puts international business here and builds the infrastructure that's here came from that party, right? The only pillar that Bermuda's standing on right now comes from the United Bermuda Party. Well, that's a story that needs to be told, along with the mistakes that were made, the things that the new people that have come into the party that were not part of the United Bermuda Party, that did not believe in the things that I think forced the United Bermuda Party to go away, are having to carry that with them because people haven't had that discussion. I believe that's what you're referring to. So we have to figure out a way to tell that story without it being something that we're continuing to carry with us, because that's not who the party is that's there today. And in order to move forward, I believe that we are going to have to address that.
Definitely agree with that. But we can go ahead and move on to our next question. We're actually starting to wrap up the questions. I just have two more.
Sure.
But why should residents of Smith South vote for you?
So, for one, I believe I represent somebody who has shown over an extended period of time that I have integrity. Um, the message that I want people to understand is accountability. We have to create a country that is held accountable at all levels. It's not just the politician whose responsibility it is to fix all of these issues that you and I have discussed tonight. It's going to be the whole community that has to be a part of it. It's not possible for one person to make all the changes. It's important for us to be in a leadership position to help to lead people to do the right thing. But we have to make sure that we're bringing the entire community along with us. Otherwise, the change won't happen. The issue that we have is that we have been in a situation where, as a country, we were spending more than we were making. So one, in a household, you have to learn how to budget, and you have to know that you have to live within your means. We have to do that same thing as a country. But what we also have to realize is that if you need to bring more money into your household, then you have to do that as well. So is that getting a second job, or is it getting a job where you make more money? Well, those are the same concepts that work with what we're trying to do as a country. We're going to have to grow the money that's coming into the country to help us to move forward. I understand that. I have been willing to listen. I've learned by the experience that I've had both in the House and the Senate. I believe that I will represent the people from constituency 8 because over all of my life, I've been working with young people. I've also been in leadership positions throughout my life. I'm willing to try everything that I can to help a team to move forward. That's my skill set, and that's what I bring to my party, and I hope to continue to bring to my community.
That sounds great. Well, as we close, if you could implement one social law that everyone had to follow, what would it be?
Social law. I have an interesting thought on that. I believe that Bermuda's lost its way on being the friendliest, happiest country in the world. And I think that everybody should take an opportunity to reach out and talk to their neighbor once a week, once a month, whatever that is. I don't know if it's something that you can enforce and change in that way, but I think it would go a long way to changing some of the behaviors that we see in our country.
Mhm.
We used to be a place where people wanted to visit because it was our people that made them want to visit. It wasn't the facilities, it wasn't anything else. In order for us to grow again and grow that pie, like I think should be our mandate right now, we're going to have to do that with our people. We have to get our people back to being welcoming. And the only way we can do that is they have to feel, that comes from within. If they don't feel happy with their community and where things are going, then they're not going to be welcoming to other people. It's not something I can mandate, but I think it should be something that we work towards.
I definitely agree. Community is really important. And I think that the more community you have, one, it helps fill in some of those gaps that you see with like the social issues, the economic issues. People are able to support each other, and that definitely makes the world of a difference. And it helps people lift each other up. So absolutely agree. Community is super important. But I want to thank you so much for joining us today. BYC meaning us, because it's just me on here, but thank you. I think this was a great conversation. I wish you all the best of luck on election day. And again, everyone, I want to encourage you, if you're a resident of constituency 8, please make sure that you're registered to vote, show up at the polls on October 5th, or if you're traveling or you need to go and vote in advance, please do that on September 28th at St. Patrick's Church. And thank you all for watching.